And number 8 for me is Jalen Hurts, quarterback. Philadelphia Eagles, Brett Whitefield with the eyebrows raising, making a little noise over there. I don't know if that means he doesn't have him on his list or if you thought maybe I was too low or whatever. But, I mean, this is the best thing I can say about Jalen Hurts, right? Everybody thinks he had a down year last year. He set career highs in passing yards and touchdowns and rushing touchdowns. His scheme was terrible. You talked about it. There's no checkdowns. The guy had no answers at all when pressure came. And so, Jalen Hurts stinks under pressure. Well, anybody would stink if they had nowhere to go with the football.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
We're going to start with QB rankings. This is the topic that gets people riled up the most, and we're just going to go right into our top 10 QB rankings.
Now, are we going to go 10-1 this time around?
What do you mean? You think we'll have the same top 10? Or same?
No, I'm saying you want to start at 10 and go down 9, 8, 7, 6.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And one other thing I did, Joe, is I kind of lumped these into, I think, archetypes as well, and I'll get into more of that.
Oh.
But one of the things I want to consider when we're getting into these rankings is nature versus nurture. Because I think it's an important conversation when it comes to quarterback play. Are these guys awesome just because of them, because of what's in their body, the talent, or is there a nature versus nurture element that makes these guys extra special? Yeah, I think it's cool. So, let's start. I guess let's start with number 10. Do you want to throw first?
Sure, I'll go first.
I'm nervous, man.
I'm nervous too. Last week we were nervous last week, but we had only one different in the head coaching. I think we're going to have more than one different this time.
I think so too.
All right, number 10 for me, Kirk Cousins. Atlanta Falcons. It's hard to reconcile what he's going to be in a new situation coming off of an Achilles tear, right? That's definitely a lot to think about. However, I'm not going to focus in what I don't know. I'm going to focus in on what I do know, and that Kirk Cousins has been unbelievably consistent in the NFL. He's done it for multiple coaches, multiple teams, and I think he's overlooked. I think too much is made of primetime Kirk, and I think all that's kind of silly. You watch him play, he's consistent, he anticipates, he's accurate. I think you got a chance to be a contending team every single year if you have Kirk Cousins as your quarterback.
So here's what's funny. I don't have Kirk in my top 10, Joe, but I told you I did archetypes, right?
Yeah.
So one of my archetypes is the Kirk Cousins archetype. So that kind of speaks volumes, right? There's a type of quarterback in the NFL that's succeeding right now that I think kind of started with Kirk Cousins. And I think these guys are obviously better than Kirk Cousins, but I call it the Kirk Cousins family, where it's you can win with this guy. He can produce for you, but the environment around him has to be good. And I think that's what Kirk has pretty much been his whole career. He's pretty much been in that Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan style offense his entire career, going back to Washington and then in Minnesota with Kevin Stefanski and Kevin O'Connell calling the plays. And he can produce for you at a super high level. He can run your offense. There's just not a lot of extra he gives you. So I think he's a guy you can win with. Not a lot of extra that he's going to give you. And so I have a whole archetype of quarterbacks. There's, I think, 3 of them from that archetype on this list today. Kirk wasn't one of them. I get it though, man. He's incredibly consistent. I mentioned the nature versus nurture thing. I think he's been a big product of nurture more than he has been nature, if that makes sense.
So I don't disagree with anything that you just said. But in doing this, it's very enlightening in that I think there's drop-offs quick, in these tiers of quarterbacks. And candidly, I had a hard time reconciling putting somebody that I had below him above him. So I went through and I ranked all 32. So that I thought that would give me a really complete look at this landscape. And his neighbors in this conversation that are right behind him are either players that are very much what you're talking about, nurture, just don't have the resume yet for me to slot them higher, or young players that look good, but I don't know. I just don't know how good they are yet. So they could certainly jump Kirk. They're knocking on the door, but I leaned into more what I know about these players at this point in time.
All right, so I guess I got to throw my number 10 out. And this is why I was nervous, because I already know I'm going to get death threats over this, Joe.
Oh, God.
and we've briefly touched on it on the show before, but Justin Herbert to me is a guy who has very much underwhelmed me in his career. And going back to that nature versus nurture discussion, the nature there is great. Physical tools all day long. Incredible talent in his body, incredible arm, all that stuff. He checks all those boxes, but the play and the results on the field just haven't been great. And that's despite the fact that the nurture element has been pretty much fine for him. He's had a decent offensive line, a good offensive line in terms of pass protection, actually. He's had very good weapons. I mean, decent play callers. I don't know what else the guy needs. And I know it's unfair to require a quarterback to drag his team to the playoffs, but the team hasn't really been bad. Now, I'm throwing last year out because last year there are a lot of injuries across the board. Defense was an absolute mess. I didn't expect him to pull them to the playoffs last year. Years prior, though, I felt like he really just left a lot to be desired in terms of results. And the league is a results-based league. He's the quarterback, and I don't care about what any stats. There isn't very many analytical points actually that point in Justin Herbert's favor either. So,
Brett, I've been trying to reconcile your Justin Herbert takes, and I think I figured it out.
Okay.
This is me trying to be a bit of a therapist here, kind of peel back the layers here and figure out what the heck's going on with my friend Brett Whitefield and why he doesn't appreciate Justin Herbert more, despite calling him a top 10 quarterback. So let's have that lens over the top of this. But when we were doing the head coaching thing, you said something that stood out to me, is that you really value aggressive natured head coaches. And I get it, right? Lions and what you saw from Dan Campbell. And I think that you, in your heart, you really like Brandon Staley. I think you do. And you like the aggressive decisions that he made. And that you are holding Justin Herbert accountable. What have you also said about Justin Herbert? You called him a coach killer. I think this is what this is coming down to, is that a stylistic head coach, has been fired. And I think it's because I think you're holding Justin Herbert accountable for that. And I think it's the other way around. I think that Brandon Staley held Justin Herbert back. You want to talk about variables like that weren't in favor of Justin Herbert being successful. I understand that he's had weapons. At the same time, Mike Williams is hurt all the time. How many offensive coordinators has the guy had?
A bunch.
Right? Like, so
Three.
Is it Kellen Moore, Lombardi, Steichen? Was Wisenhunt? I don't think.
Wasn't Anthony Lynn?
Anthony Lynn, right? Yeah. So I mean, like, there's like a lot of different play callers, like not being able to establish that, but despite that, he's been able to win. Like,
with what?
With a bad head coach that can't figure out his own defense.
How many? They went to the playoffs. What, once?
One year, right? And they blew it against Trevor Lawrence. Like, I get it.
1 point lead just evaporated. Now that's very much Brandon Staley's problem. But you're telling me you couldn't score 3 more points in that second half? Like, holy crap, bro!
I don't know, man.
You're talking me out of him being a top 10 quarterback. I agree with what you said, by the way. But
I was a little bit right about that, huh?
I don't really like Brandon Staley as a head coach, but I don't want to hold Justin Herbert accountable for his issues. But I do like the aggressiveness so Staley was supposed to be some analytical mastermind coming over from the Rams, and he just wasn't. Like, he made a lot of really bad in-game decisions. But I don't know. I think the situation's been good. And like, there's good quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks that have done a lot more with a lot less than Justin Herbert. At some point, we have to hold him accountable. Now, I'm glad you pointed out, I still have him in the top 10 because I do. So for the haters listening, he's still in my top 10. I'm just not willing to go top 5. And in the bucket, the archetype I have him in, by the way, is guys that can give you a little more because they have a lot of raw talent in their body. So he's not in that Kirk Cousins archetype, but he is in that probably next archetype where it's, if there's a play to be made on the line, I think he has the talent in his body to do it. And I don't know.
He's my number. He's number 7 for me, Brett.
Okay, so we're not that far off.
Yeah, but you know what it is? It's like this is the big thing that I talk about with draft analysis, right? Everybody's got rankings and lists, right? So, like, great, here's your list. Cool, love your list. I care so much more about what you say.
Sure,
like, you know what I mean? And so that's why it's like, yeah, we're off by 3 spots, but I don't know. I feel like you're like super reluctant with your placing of Herbert. It's almost like it was painful for you to put him at number 10. Like you didn't want to.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, I think here's something you'll learn about me fast, Joe. If you already don't know this, since we've been friends for a long time, So a lot of times my talking points are based on what I feel like narrative is. So I feel like Justin Herbert is routinely called a top 3, top 4 quarterback in the NFL. So when I tell you I think he's the 10th best quarterback, that seems like a positive on its face, but I feel like I have to combat the narrative that you're really low on Justin Herbert. Like, what are you watching? So I feel like I'm already taking a defensive, critical posture, even though I like the guy. I just don't like him as much as consensus. Does that make sense?
I understand where you're coming from, and now we have this beautiful marriage of your favorite head coach in Jim Harbaugh against your least favorite quarterback in the league in Justin Herbert. Should be fun to monitor that throughout the course of the season together.
Absolutely. All right, you're number 9, Joe. Come on.
All right, number 9 for me is a guy that I'm sure is on your list as well. Just got paid. Jared Goff, Detroit Lions, in at number 9. I think it's really hard. It's really hard for quarterbacks to be successful in more than one place. That was something that I listened to Kurt Warner talk about. He was on Locked On Dolphins with Kyle Krabs recently and talked about, hey, you know what? Like, you don't see a lot of guys that are able to be successful somewhere and then go somewhere else and be successful, because I think so much of quarterbacks, right, like in the tenure that you get with an organization, they become keenly aware of who you are as a player and know how to build around you and know what you're not good at, right? Like, I think Russell Wilson's a great example of that. I think Seattle knew exactly the problems that Russell Wilson had and knew how to kind of work around that. And that's why they never let Russ cook, right? There's a reason they didn't let them do that. I think you're seeing that with Deshaun Watson a little bit. You know, Tom Brady's an exception, but just think throughout the course of the league, these big name quarterbacks that go somewhere else, Derek Carr, right? It doesn't always really work out. Jared Goff led the Rams to the Super Bowl, was very productive every season, and everybody said Sean McVay. Sean McVay makes him, right? He's in his ears until 15 seconds telling him exactly what to do. All right, well, then explain to me the last 2 seasons with Ben Johnson in Detroit and what that offense is. And I say this very respectfully because I think the Detroit Lions are a very good football team. We're going to talk about them later on today. But going into last season, when this offense was awesome last year, going into last season, what did he have? I mean, a rookie tight end in Sam Laporta that wind up being pretty good. A new backfield in David Montgomery and a rookie in Jahmyr Gibbs worked out, but going in this season, we didn't know. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown's a good receiver, but like, what else did they have at receiver? Josh Reynolds and like the hope of Jameson Williams, and he was the trigger man for this offense. I think I have a lot of respect for Jared Goff and how he's been able to transcend a lot of situations. How he's been able to lead 2 very deep playoff runs, including once to the Super Bowl. I think that people struggle with Jared Goff a little bit. Stop struggling and watch him play. He's a good player, and I think he should be in everybody's top 10 list.
You nailed it. You nailed it, Joe. So I have Jared Goff as my 6. And in that Kirk Cousins bucket I was talking about, that he is my highest ranked quarterback in that archetype of player. Just some quick Fantasy Points data suite stats to throw at you. He's top 5 in every single discernible accuracy metric over the last 2 years. That's adjusted completion percentage, catchable ball rate, the high accuracy bucket that we chart. So the top level throws, his ratio of hero throws to turnover worthy throws is excellent. I think it's the best ratio in the NFL. He has 114.3 passer rating from a clean pocket. Over the last 6 years, 4 of those seasons, Jared Goff has averaged top 5 EPA per dropback. There's only one other quarterback that did that. His name is Patrick Mahomes. Incredible across the board. Now, does he have limitations? Absolutely. I mentioned the clean pocket stat. You don't want to look at the stat when he's not in a clean pocket because it's ugly. So in that nature versus nurture discussion, I think Jared Goff does require quite a bit of nurture to pull the most out of him. He's got a great supporting cast, great play caller, awesome offensive line. And so they do make it a little bit easier on her, but he's executing what he's supposed to be executing at the highest level, or one of the highest levels in the league. So he's my 6. I said that already. Yeah, he's my 6. But I couldn't agree more with everything that you said.
Okay, so I've given you my 10 and 9, and through that we've gotten your 10 and 6. So
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out my 9, and I just want to say that my 6, so starting with Goff all the way to my 9, are very close to me. Like I could have pulled names out of the hat and would have been okay with where they landed. So I have Dak Prescott at 9 for me. Dakota Rain Prescott. Yeah, I went back and forth with him because obviously at the top of his game, when you're watching him ball out and see what he does, he looks awesome. He looks the part, right? The Dallas offense has been explosive. They've been great. He led the NFL in all kinds of metrics last year, advanced metrics. My favorite stat from him is first and catchable ball rate. It's like there's no cleaner stat than just, I'm just going to give my receivers the best chance possible. He's got a really good blend of being aggressive, but also taking what the defense gives you. Like he's got a good head on his shoulders as far as that goes. Executes the offensive game plan at a really high level. And last year specifically, a lot of people soured on him because of the way the season ended. He actually earned more of my respect last year because how much of what the Cowboys did fell on his shoulders. Years past, he's had that robust
And then like Kirk Cousins was my number 10 in this. We'll talk about his neighbors. We'll get there. But
Yeah.
Dakota Rain coming in at number 6 for me, which means I need to tell you who my number 8 is, right?
Yep.
Because I've given you Cousins, I've given you Goff. And number 8 for me is Jalen Hurts, quarterback. Philadelphia Eagles, Brett Whitefield with the eyebrows raising, making a little noise over there. I don't know if that means he doesn't have him on his list or if you thought maybe I was too low or whatever. But I mean, this is the best thing I can say about Jalen Hurts, right? Everybody thinks he had a down year last year. He like set career highs in passing yards and touchdowns and rushing touchdowns. His scheme was terrible. You talked about it. There's no checkdowns. The guy had no answers at all when pressure came. And so like, yeah, Jalen Hurts stinks under pressure. Well, anybody would stink if they had nowhere to go with the football. Go back to that year before, man. I can't get it out of my head. Like that dude was a dude down the stretch for Philly. And I know he has a good supporting cast and all that, but yeah, I don't think you can deny he went blow for blow with Mahomes. I think the punter lost him the Super Bowl, man. Aaron Sipros. If there's a guy that should be, exiled from Philadelphia, we need to talk more about Aaron Sipros and that crappy punt that put the Chiefs in position to get the go-ahead touchdown. So I don't know. I'm in on Jalen Hurts. He's not without his warts. I love the leadership. I think he's got the it factor, and I think with the scheme shored up around him, we'll see more of what we enjoyed in 2022 compared to last season.
Again, you nailed it, Joe. He's my 5, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's what that meant. I was like, boy, I hope he doesn't have him outside the top 10.
No, it's interesting because sometimes you have recent feelings about a player. And I know I think I said on this show, he forgot how to play football last year. There were moments of that for sure, right? Like, especially down the stretch, that whole Eagles team just became dysfunctional, whether it was defense, the pass catching unit, the offensive scheme. And so I think Hurts definitely kind of had some bad moments where it was either go ball or scramble. There was a stretch of play last year. But when you look at the last 3 seasons of him as a starter in aggregate, he's gotten better in certain ways every single year. Yeah. And he relies on yards after catch almost as little as any QB in the NFL. So like everything he's getting is either with his legs or with his arm. The team's not helping him out a ton. And I know he's got A.J. Brown and a great offensive line, and that seems controversial to say. But because of the way the design plays, he has to carry so much of the burden. No other player moved the chains more than him other than Josh Allen with his legs last year. So he's given you a little bit extra. So if I'm not, and that's kind of the way I measured this, is like if you're not in that Kirk Cousins tier, that Jared Goff, Dak Prescott tier where you're just executing the offense at a high level, I want you to be able to give me a little extra. And Jalen Hurts has that extra to me. He can get it done with his legs. Obviously, I think the arm talent speaks for itself. He needs to probably mature a little bit more and take that next step as a leader, but I think he's right there in the mix.
38 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 seasons. I know the tush push is something, but I mean, come on, man. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable production. All right. So I have given my 10 through, well, I somehow my tops 10, 9, 8, 7, and 6 are all out there through all of this. So I've got Kirk Cousins at 10, Goff at 9, Hurts at 8, Herbert at 7, Prescott at 6. What do you need to fill in?
Yeah, I got to throw out my number 8 and my number 7 to get my bottom 5 in there.
All right, well, let's get there.
My number 8, and he's right in that Kirk Cousins archetype of high-level executor, not a ton of talent in his body necessarily, and that's Brock Purdy. Couldn't ask for a guy. And I going back to Take Talk and On the Clock, my 2 other shows, I've hammered Brock Purdy on both of those shows. John Hanson's show, Matchup Points, Guru in the Morning on SiriusXM. I have hammered Brock Purdy into oblivion because I just don't think he's the most talented guy, but you can't argue with the results, wins, production. It's there. 118 passer rating from a clean pocket. And the dude has been absolutely balling. And then all the accuracy numbers speak for themselves. Like he's up there in just about every metric. Not quite as high as Goff, but he's right there, top 10 in just about everything. So he's doing what he's being asked to do at a really, really high level. And, that's all we got to work with. So I like it. Number 8.
Some of his second reaction stuff is really good too. You're just like, really? I can't believe you can do that. So the phrase that I keep going back to with Brock Purdy, who is number 11 for me. So he was the closest neighbor that I had to Kirk Cousins. What I keep going back to with Brock Purdy is I always say he's hard for me because I know what I watch at Iowa State. There was a reason he was the last pick in the draft and barely drafted at all. But then you also can't deny the results and what he's been able to do. And you could talk about scheme, you can talk about players around him, but the situation is the situation, right? Like you don't have to think about Brock Purdy playing for another team because he doesn't. He plays for the 49ers and he has those players and that scheme and that play caller. So I don't know what more you can ask for out of a player. I recognize that, he wouldn't potentially be a very good player for some other teams, but that doesn't matter. He is for the 49ers and he's knocking on the door for me for the top 10.
So funny, my 7 is the man Herbert gets comped to a lot, and that's Matthew Stafford, Los Angeles Rams. And here's what stuck out to me. Obviously, he went to LA, won the Super Bowl. But then this past year, I think a lot of people are arguing he didn't play his best football. But I actually saw an evolution in Matthew Stafford that blew me away. Because this is a super aggressive, arm talent supremo who decided, you know what? I'm going to evolve. We're going to rely on this run game. I'm not going to play YOLO ball as much as I have in my career. 25th in deep throw percentage. Joe, if I told you that doesn't make sense, right? With a guy with Matt Stafford's arm, 25th in deep throw rate in the NFL. That's crazy, right? 20th in first read percentage. So one of the criticisms of Stafford his entire career is that he locks onto his guy. It's Calvin Johnson and Calvin Johnson only. It's Cooper Kupp and Cooper Kupp only. Well, last year he ranked 20th in first read percentage. So there's 19 other quarterbacks that locked onto their first read more than Matthew Stafford. I think that was a big evolution in his game. It was by far the lowest number of his career. And then he's despite doing that and becoming a little bit more conservative, a little more take what the defense gives you mindset, he's still ranked 4th in hero throw rate, which is those big time throws you see downfield that are beating coverage itself. So he's still giving you that little extra despite kind of becoming a little bit more conservative and playing within the scheme a little bit better.
Isn't it crazy that last year was the first time that Matthew Stafford was in the top 10 for MVP votes? Like the dude had 41 touchdowns and 4,800 yards in 2021. They won the Super Bowl. He didn't get it. What are we doing here? I have Matthew Stafford at 5. So, I mean, he's a dude, man. Like I think he's so forgotten in this landscape of quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, like historically productive in every imaginable way. And whatever, the Detroit situation was the Detroit situation, but like he's good. He's really good. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the game still. And I feel like I'm glad that we both have him represented really high because he deserves it.
For sure. And I think one of the things that's sort of irritating as someone who likes to analyze QB play is when he was with the Lions, the knock on him was, well, he hasn't won anything. losing team almost every year. I think he made the playoffs 2 or 3 times in a Lions uniform. So then when he got the monkey off his back and went to LA and won the Super Bowl, it seems like that would have bought him all the respect he deserved, right? And I still think people struggle with that. So I'm glad you have him in the top 5, but yeah, awesome player. It's been a pleasure watching him too. I've pretty much watched every game the dude's played. So yeah.
Well, we both have each other's 5, right? You have Hurts at 5. I have Stafford at 5.
Right.
So are you all your 10 through 5 has been disclosed?
Yeah. I'll recap real quick. 10, Justin Herbert. 9, Dak Prescott. 8, Brock Purdy. 7, Matthew Stafford. 6, Jared Goff. 5, Jalen Hurts.
All right. So I'll give you my number 4.
Go for it.
My number 4 is Lamar Jackson from the Baltimore Ravens.
Same.
Okay, so we're going to be aligned. This will be the player we have. Well, I'm sure we're going to have number 1 the same as well.
I'm guessing we're closing this out exactly the same, to be honest with you.
Well, based on what you just said, I can guarantee it. Because you know who I have it to.
Yes.
But Lamar Jackson, I mean, dude's a baller, right? He's 2-time NFL MVP. Rushing production's off the charts. The volume, the passing volume stats, that's just not the type of offense that he runs. Like you look at some of these other quarterbacks, they throw the ball 600 times a year. That's not Lamar, right? He's 300 passing attempts guy. But he's a playmaker, right? And he's able to lead highly productive offenses, and he means a lot. And I don't think that they've ever really had the receiving talent around him. And I think there's been a lot of questions about scheme. And I think he becomes a difficult player for people to completely appreciate. But I mean, all he does is win. The Ravens are 58-19 with him as a quarterback. Now you wish maybe there were some deeper postseason runs, and if there's a criticism I think is warranted for Lamar, it's like when your teams needed you the most, like sometimes late in the season he's been injured or not being able to even in the NFC Championship game last year. So or the AFC Championship game. So that was a very competitive game. So I think that's the kind of the missing piece from his overall resume. But I mean, the guy's a baller, right? And there's been a lot of different things around him in Baltimore, but he still leads a highly productive offense that wins football games.
You want to talk nature versus nurture, right? This guy has got it done with as little nurture as possible. I mean, the pass weapons have not been there for him, yet he still gets it done. Obviously, his legs are a big part of that. Here's one thing that really stands out to me. He probably would have been in my top 4 this time last year. So it's funny he's still 4th because I did see a massive evolution for Lamar last year where, and we expected it to some degree with Todd Monken calling the plays instead of Greg Roman, but he became better as a passer, more accurate, more disciplined. He ranked 6th in adjusted completion percentage, 77.4%, the highest mark of his career by a lot. Ranked 3rd in hero throw rate, 5.9%. So he's making those elite level throws at the 3rd highest level. And then this is the stat that just blows my mind for Lamar because he's never even sniffed this. 1st in the entire NFL in completion percentage over expectation.
Wow.
So that's an adjusted stat that takes into account target depth, down and distance, things of that nature. So it's adjusted for the situation. He ranked 1st in the league in completion percentage over expectation. So he is awesome. The legs, he also gives you that little something extra, right? So he's gotten to a place where he can run the offense as needed. But man, when you need that extra play, he can go get it. So I love Lamar. I think he's awesome. He's definitely earned my respect. 2-time MVP.
In 6 seasons?
Yeah.
It's pretty doggone good. Okay. You're number 3?
Joe Burrow. Is that you as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Joe Burrow.
Yeah, favorite stat on Burrow from last year. 54.2% accurate throw rate, that highest bucket of accuracy. So he's maximizing the result of every play. It's funny too. He gets a lot of Chase and Higgins are a great duo to play with, obviously. It seems like they'd make your life easier. But what's funny is they both excel most at contested catches. Both good. They've developed into very good route runners as well. And there's a separation element there. But Burrow's had to just trust his guys a lot, which means you have to be an accurate thrower. You can't be missing throws when you're throwing into tight windows, right? So Burrow getting it done despite playing with 2 guys that, excel most with contested catch situations or tight window receiving. I just think that's huge for him. Like he's been awesome. So
Yeah, Burrow's a dude, man. I just want him to have a normal season at some point, right? Like it's insane every year. The ACL in year one, then he had like preseason injuries the last couple of seasons that have like delayed him being able to practice, and he's kind of rusty to start the year. And then last year with the wrist, it's like, can this guy just have a normal year? And that's concerning. But like when this dude's on the field, man, high level mental processing accuracy. Like if your most important traits for the quarterback position are decision making and accuracy, it's Joe Burrow all day long, man. Yeah, I think that his accuracy and ball placement complements those receivers quite well. If you want, contested catches, ball skills, trust guys to win leverage battles and go get the football. I mean, Joe Burrow's a great guy to throw in the football, and I think that Tyler Boyd's been a nice little compliment to all of that. And I mean, he's done this. There's no running game. There's never been a running game with Cincinnati with any level of consistency. They stink at running the ball, and so like. And then I don't think the scheme doesn't help him at all either, right? Like it's West Coast passing, dude. Like drop back, read it and rip it, right? There's not play action. There's not a lot of RPO or like binary stuff to make it simple for him, So I think Burrow's awesome. It's just a matter of, okay, can we just have some normal seasons? Can you just be healthy and go play? And then I think I'm always concerned about Cincinnati as a franchise. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
They're just goofy with their business decisions. I mean, let's call it what it is. Like a cheap owner that they have to do business differently. And like, I thought it would change once they got Joe Burrow, but it hasn't, right? They're still doing the same garbage they've always done. So I'm worried a little bit of how that's going to hold him back, but man, Joe Burrow as a player is unbelievable. And like the skill set it still works, man. I know he doesn't run around all the time and like do this off script stuff, but what he does with his mind and his ball placement is candidly probably better than anyone in the league.
Yeah, it's unreal. Your point about Zach Taylor and the play calling that resonates huge. He's got to be, when you look at all the McVay Shanahan guys, he's an albatross. Yeah. Like he does not do what they do. There's not a lot of deception in what he does. The scheme is a little different, and then the decision making in game is also bad. So, yeah, that resonates big.
Number 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably pretty easy. I think, like I said, we're going to close this out the same. You got Josh Allen.
Yeah.
The Bills man has Josh Allen number 2. Credit not putting him 1, but
you can't put him 1. The guy's Pat's won 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls. He goes to the AFC Championship game every year.
Yeah.
I think that's more because his defense shows up for him in the playoffs, but
I'm going to give you a good runway here to rant about your boy Josh Allen, but I wanted to point out a couple of my favorite data suite stats about Josh Allen. So there's a lot of mobile quarterbacks in the league. We've hit a couple of them. Hurts, Lamar Jackson, even Mahomes to an extent. There's many more. But the thing that stands out for Josh Allen above the rest of them, he avoided 30 sacks in 2023, and he was only personally responsible for 3 sacks. That's via our charting. So we had him responsible for only 3 sacks of his own, and he avoided 30 other sacks. No, like you look at like Lamar and Hurts all avoided around that same amount of sacks, but they also took 12 to 15 sacks that we credited to them. So this dude he's found the balance between chaos and order. It's like perfect for Josh Allen, and that's why he is so good at making plays out of structure. Also, for a guy who gets knocked with his accuracy, 2.6% completion percentage over expectation last year, that ranked inside the top 5. I cited that stat as being my favorite for Lamar. Well, it's also true for Allen. Some of that is the nature of the way those guys play, right? They let the play break down. They're throwing to open receivers often in scramble mode, but it's still impressive for a guy who gets knocked for throw accuracy there. So
yeah, I think it's fair though. I don't think that Josh Allen is top tier ball placement. I think he's got general accuracy, right? Like that's what he has, general accuracy. And I'm interested to see, like he's talked about his top priority this offseason being that he's getting back to mechanics, right? Like he said, what are you working on this offseason? He said, big time mechanics, getting back to digitally mapping them and seeing where there's any deficiencies. And that's what really was a big part of his breakout in 2020. He spent the time digitally mapping mechanics and finding out where he was long with the stride or long with his arm, and he wants to be more efficient with it. And you go back over the last couple of seasons, he's had throwing arm injuries the last 2 years. He had a shoulder this past season and the year before was an elbow. And I think through that, you alter your mechanics to compensate for the deficiency left behind by the injury, and things can get a little bit wonky. And I'm glad to hear that he's back to kind of figuring out where he can shore that up so he can be better with ball placement, because I think in some of the quick game is where it gets really frustrating, where he's got a great opportunity for a screen or like a quick pass that he can lead a guy into space, and the ball's behind him, they have to adjust, and it takes away from yards after catch and the efficiency overall in the quick game. And I think that's going to be more of what he's going to be asked to do with Joe Brady. So I'm excited to see how that evolves. But with Josh Allen, I think things that maybe get overlooked with him is how clutch he is. I mean, like fourth quarter passer rating, like come from behind wins, playoffs. He's always shows up in the playoffs, like literally all the time. He's high level. The dude scores like more touchdowns than anybody. Like, the touchdowns matter a lot in football, man. I know it doesn't take like a PhD in football to realize that, but the dude scores touchdowns at rates that are like transcend anybody in the league. And I think the conversation goes back to turnovers, but like the best quarterbacks turn the ball over, right? Like, you have to be able to and willing to just fire it in there sometimes. And wake me up the next time a Josh Allen turnover impacts a Bills playoff game, right? Like it doesn't happen. So Josh is a dude. I wish his defense was better in the playoffs for him. Excited to see him this year, and man, am I happy he's my franchise quarterback.
Yes, sir. I've probably never taken an L as big as I have on Josh Allen, because I did not like him as a prospect. That we've had
me neither, dude. Yeah, I mean, like, we have to hide from it. There's a lot to learn from that evaluation.
For sure.
Man, we could do an entire podcast on that, but like I learned a lot from him and Patrick Mahomes. I learned a ton about scouting players, and like coming out of this era of football where you saw Tom Brady and Drew Brees as like the premier quarterbacks, and they played the game a certain way, and you got to be able to win from the pocket, right? You get all this and the game has evolved, and I think these players are a big reason why. And so, like if you hadn't missed, then you haven't scouted. And I think there were great lessons to learn from some of those evaluations.
All right, Joe, Patrick Mahomes, obviously number one guy. I didn't prepare anything to say about him because I think the resume speaks for itself. I know we're not QB wins guys, right? But 3 Super Bowls the last 4 years. He goes to the AFC Championship game every single year. It's insanely impressive. Sorry, that was 3 Super Bowls last 5 years, not 4 years. So, but everything the guy does, I guess one thing I'll throw at you that my guy, John Costco from PFF, shared with me a couple months ago is that you're familiar with EPA, the stat, right? Expected points added. So it's obviously in the analytics world, it's a very prestigious stat. Passing from 0 to 9 yards doesn't typically yield a positive EPA. It's basically like a run play. There's only in NFL history, there's only 8 seasons where a quarterback has had a positive EPA on throws in rhythm from 0 to 9 yards, and Patrick Mahomes has 4 of them. That's pretty crazy. So we're in this world where Mahomes is forced to kind of take what the defense gives him. That's what he's amazing at. He will gut you. Whatever way you allow him to gut you, he'll gut you. And that stat alone is pretty evident that he makes the most with what the defense gives him, no matter what. And that's why in clutch moments, in the playoffs, it almost seems like you can't stop him, even though the weapons haven't always been great, sans Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. But
this is what I want to say about Patrick Mahomes, because like it's not hard to talk about why he's so good. But if I were a Chiefs fan and I wanted to become more excited about Patrick Mahomes, and I was a fan of the 31 other teams, and I wanted to be nervous about Patrick Mahomes moving forward in a very respectful way, it's the vertical passing. And I'm sure you have some numbers you could pull up from the data suite about Patrick Mahomes last year in vertical passing. The numbers were terrible, like literally bottom of the NFL in terms of completion percentage and passer rating on throws 20 yards or more down the field. Well, what do they do this offseason? They got Xavier Worthy. They got Hollywood Brown. Like they're the down the field speed elements of this offense, they're coming back. And post Tyreek Hill, of course they trade away Tyreek Hill, win 2 Super Bowls, right? So let's not act like it cost them, but it did cost them with vertical passing. I'm not sitting here telling you that Worthy or Brown are Tyreek Hill, but what they are is speed down the field that you have to respect. So you want to play 2 high safeties against Mahomes, Well, you better be able to stay leveraged over top of those guys who candidly can win foot races against pretty much any corner in the league. And so watch out for Patrick Mahomes if this vertical passing game comes back, because that's been missing and they've taken steps here to get that better.
Furthermore, I just gave you that stat about passing 0 to 9 yards. That gets a lot easier when there's a vertical passing space. They didn't have a single guy on that roster last year that could really beat man coverage at a high level. Travis Kelce being their number one guy, but he's a tight end. They didn't have a receiver that could go beat corners in man coverage routinely. Rashee Rice is more of a zone beater, yak player, and then after that, they pretty much had nothing. So to your point, I'm excited to see Hollywood Brown is a man beater. Xavier Worthy, absolutely a man beater. This should be one of the best iterations of the Kansas City offense we've seen thus far. And it's kind of scary to think about because they've been winning despite everything we just said. So